Legal Amigo here. This is part two of Did Al Gore Suppress Voter Turnout in the 2000 New Hampshire presidential primaries? There's Al Gore. He was vice president at the time, running against Senator Bill Bradley, senator from New Jersey, former NBA basketball player. I was there. I was a senior at Stanford University at the time. I think this is when I was a freshman. Yeah, it was. But I was a senior at Stanford at the time. I got a research grant to study presidential primaries. So I got a ticket to go to New Hampshire to study presidential primaries. I didn't have a plan. I just showed up. But I had been a White House intern in the summer of 1998. That's why I have this 8x10 autographed. Let me get out of the way. 8x10 letter from Al Gore to Stephen Kane. That's my real name, Legal Amigo, as you know me. And I have one from President Bill Clinton. This was all done with an auto pen. I worked in the political affairs office in 1998. They used auto pens to autograph all the photos. I was so disheartened because I thought, well, obviously they're not going to sign thousands of photos themselves. But anyway, this was all done automatically and the interns would do it. We would write letters on behalf of the president also, like in the president's voice, to different constituencies, groups around the country. So anyway, I was like 20 years old and I showed up in New Hampshire without a plan. I just showed up in Nashua. I got off of at a bus stop and I happened to see a motorcade. So I thought, oh, maybe this is Al Gore's motorcade. And I went and knocked on the door of this restaurant where the motorcade was and I asked for somebody who I thought might be there, like someone I knew who worked in politics. And sure enough, they were there. They came down and got me. We were friends. So I got to hang out with the vice president's team and hang out with them for a few days, all the time I was out there, and even sleep like in some gymnasium floor with all the volunteers and stuff like that. So I got plugged in right away. They happened to be watching the Super Bowl. The Tennessee Titans were playing. This was the final play. The St. Louis Rams, they were in St. Louis at the time, won. Tennessee almost scored but didn't. And Al Gore referenced that in his acceptance speech, which I got to watch live, when he won in New Hampshire, saying the Titans may have come up short, just a yard short or something like that, but we won, something like that. But anyway, I want to emphasize that this was a really close election. If you look at the results from the New Hampshire primary, it's just a few thousand votes of difference. It was a really, really close election. So any little thing that might have suppressed voter turnout would have made a big difference. And it was in the polls and it was reported that Bill Bradley was going to win in New Hampshire. Now, this is me meeting Bill Bradley when he was running for president before the New Hampshire primaries. I'm not going to say that one or the other was my favorite. I kind of was learning about politics. I had some things I liked about one and some things I liked about the other, but he was nice enough. So we helped out the campaign those next few days in a lot of different ways. One way we helped out was doing something called visibility, where we would just stand outside of key events where the media was going to be with signs for Al Gore. And this is me doing that with a friend of mine, and you can see the Gore 2000 sign. That's one thing we would do. We would go into diners also, for example, and maybe the diner wasn't very full and the vice president was coming in to shake people's hands. So he actually shook my hand and the back of my head was on TV that night. I guess I was posing as like a New Hampshire voter. We did all sorts of stuff to help, and we were traveling in the motorcade. Now, this is probably what people think of when they think of like a vice president's motorcade or a presidential motorcade. And it's true, they're limos and they're SUVs and things like that. And, the vice president has Air Force Two and the cars go on the plane, like in the cargo section. But there are also minivans and stuff like that for maybe people who aren't as close to the vice president or don't have like a White House role or a role in the vice president's office or whatever. I was in one of the minivans, and I was in the minivan with Al Gore's press secretary at the time and one of his foreign policy advisors. We're going to talk more about them in the next video. This is part two. We're going to have one more part three. And but anyway, that was my vantage point throughout the campaign. This is Al Gore in a New Hampshire diner. I'm not in there, but this is just, I think this is a photo I found online, not one of mine, of Al Gore in a New Hampshire diner. And that's what they do, right? To get on TV, meet voters, get the word out. And this is another photo I found online of the Gore 2000 campaign. I believe it was in New Hampshire. And this is the sort of thing we would do, right? To raise visibility about the campaign, remind people to vote for this candidate. But keep in mind, it was a very close election. It looked like Bill Bradley was gaining momentum and about to win. And that's where our story hits the crescendo. So follow me or save this video and later find part 3. I'm going to put that out tomorrow of how Al Gore may have suppressed voter turnout in New Hampshire, what I saw from my perspective, and then evidence I have found to back up my story online too. Thanks for listening. Come back for part 3.